Welcome to the Joseph Apartments Talk Show. Today I have a special guest, Maddy Simonian with the Cornerstone Lending Group. But before I ask any questions, Maddy recently got married. How's married life, Maddy?
It's good. Yeah, it's been great.
How long?
How long have you been dating?
Married. How long have you been married?
Since October, so that's 8 months? 9 months?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So she can finally think straight. So that's why I got her in to ask some questions. Maddy, lending is a gigantic part of the puzzle of apartment buying, and it's typically the roadblock. We don't like you guys because you're always holding something up. So hopefully in this conversation today, you can give us some ideas on how you think. Because if a buyer knows how you guys think ahead of time, it's going to make the process a lot easier. So maybe you can speak to my clients from a perspective of explaining what's going on. So just for starters, a macro question. What's the current loan-to-value ratio that you see? So if you do the last 20 deals that you've done, what's the average loan-to-value? And then touch on value, how you guys determine value.
So luckily working with me, I'm a commercial mortgage broker, so I'm able to really hone in on a lot of different loan products. I have over 200 capital groups that I work with nationwide. And ultimately, the main difference between residential and commercial loans in that sense is all about cash flow.
Hold on. You have 200 sources. So if I say, get me a loan, you can reach out to 200 different banks, institutions.
Banks, credit unions, private capital, et cetera. So based on the cash flow, what we're seeing right now in today's market with current interest rates is typically about a 60% loan to value is where most are hitting. But from a bank perspective, you're able to get up to 75% loan to value with traditional underwriting models.
Now, value isn't what sales price I put together, right? I put together a deal at $3 million, and my client thinks it's worth $3 million. The seller is happy. That's not necessarily what the appraiser is going to say it's worth, right?
Right. So ultimately, banks are always going to leverage off of the appraised value versus necessarily market price.
Who picks the appraiser?
Typically in lending, we're able to get a little bit creative sometimes on that, but most of the time it's up to the bank's discretion.
Okay. You can't help me get a better appraiser. The bank's going to pick the appraiser for me then.
Yeah, they have a list of approved appraisers that they like to work with. And what we're able to do on our end at Cornerstone as well is we're really able to help coordinate with the appraiser, providing documentation, cash flow models, et cetera, to help essentially get the best value.
You can put the best face on the property for the appraiser then as a representative of the buyer.
Yeah, we help to really package up the loan as well as working with the appraiser to get it done.
Most of my clients' properties were built, or the properties that we're buying were built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, maybe some of the 70s. How do lenders look at that kind of age versus like a brand new building in, Huntington Beach or Newport Beach or something?
Yeah, really good question. I feel like this is something that gets missed a lot with buyers, and it's a discrepancy between lenders and buyers. So in California specifically, we have soft story retrofit laws that are in place for properties that are built after that 1948 designation. Typically,
so that's earthquake related?
That's earthquake related.
What's the word, soft what?
It's soft story retrofit, and we see a lot of this in Los Angeles County. Essentially, it means like if you have parking if you have parking and then you have residential units above that parking, that's considered tuck under parking, in which case typically there's laws regarding retrofitting that building, which essentially just means making sure that it's up to code.
That sounds expensive.
It can be expensive.
So a lender would look at an older property the same as others, unless there's that issue of tuck under parking, in which case will a lender require something to be done before they'll finance it?
Yeah, that's kind of the gray area. For purchases, it's a lot easier to get around because ultimately you have a new buyer that can essentially put that work into the building post-closing. For refinances, it gets a little bit more nuanced in the sense that these borrowers have already owned the building, so they're expected to keep the building up to code. But it really depends. There's some lenders out there that are not looking so much at the soft story than others, but the most competitive banks today are requiring it.
Okay. And the other thing is insurance right now. I had an insurance guy come in the other day. How are you guys seeing, what's the impact of insurance on loans?
Insurance has been the biggest factor, especially in California. In California alone, we've seen insurance premiums double, if not triple, in the last few years, which ultimately, from a lender's perspective, brings the cash flow down, which ultimately nets you less loan dollars at the end of the day. So insurance for us has been a big issue.
Theoretically, what percent of an issue is it? So, like, is it affecting 5% of the valuation, or 2%, or is it that big?
I mean, it really depends. Like, older buildings get hit harder than newer buildings. Older buildings that haven't been retrofitted get hit harder than ones that have. So ultimately, it just really depends. Is the property in a fire zone? I can't speak to insurance because I'm not on the insurance side, but where we really run into potential pitfalls is not hitting that insurance early in the process, since that's been a main driver.
So if a lender has to, if you have to account for more money for expense side for insurance, that's going to affect the amount of money you can loan out.
Exactly.
How has the increase in interest rates affected values? So in single family, it was 2.5% forever during pandemic, and now it's 6.5%. It doesn't seem like interest rates have gone up that much in your world, because it's typically adjustable for the first, or it's adjustable loans that you guys put on. You put fixed and then they go into adjustable. So you haven't seen a big swing in interest rates, or have you? And how does that affect prices?
Yeah, definitely a big swing in interest rates. So back in 2020, 2021, and early 2022,
which is the lowest,
it was the lowest interest rates that we've ever seen. I mean, the lowest apartment rate that I wrote for was about 2.8%, and that was an apartment building in Los Angeles. Now, for that same apartment building, you're probably looking in like the low 6%.
Okay, so they're comparable to single family then.
Yeah.
So you're looking at triple, between double and triple then, interest rates.
Pretty much, which for an apartment investor in Los Angeles who refinanced or purchased a property during that time at the 3% rates, they're now having to have those conversations about, do we refinance, do we sell? Because ultimately, with where interest rates are today, it's bringing loan amounts down. So if you got a 75% LTV loan back in 2020, that's probably, you're probably going to be cut closer to like 60% loan to value.
Well, this geezer started in 1981 when interest rates were 18%. So you youngins complaining about 6% is crazy. Now, has that affected values?
Yes. So Los Angeles County, more so than Orange County and San Diego counties, really values are driven based off of buyers and sellers in market price. So when you have interest rates that are higher and people are having trouble obtaining loans for those, ultimately sellers have to drop price in order to incentivize.
Are you seeing that?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot more.
It's just mathematical reality.
Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot more properties sit on market for longer, less bids coming through, mostly because of the availability of financing is tougher than it was years ago.
If I forced you to come up with a number and say that, let's say interest rates have gone between two to three times the amount increase, what percent has that affected prices? Have prices come down 5%, 10%, 50% as a result of that, just a single interest rate increase?
Hard to say. It's a little hard to say because I'm not on the sales side, the investment sales side, so I can't speak so much for values than I can debt, but we are seeing...
You're just loaning less.
Yes. So
what percent less are you loaning, in other words?
In today's market, I mean...
With the interest rate changes. So that Los Angeles one from 2.5% to now 6.3, whatever. Theoretically, what percent would you loan less just because of the interest rate change? Forget the insurance one. Issue.
You're probably looking at if rents didn't appreciate that much. I mean,
apples to apples,
10 to 15%.
Okay, well that makes sense.
But ultimately, the nice part about apartments is there's so many different avenues and ways that we can get around certain things, especially in LA County with, certain rent freezes that happened, or maybe, having tenant problems. That's kind of where we're able to really come in as an organization and a company to really help the client get to that level that they're trying to, outside of maybe traditionally like the big banks that they're used to working with.
On deferred maintenance, how do banks treat deferred maintenance as opposed to something that's not in disrepair? Do you require like a withhold, or do you require What's a typical bank, and then you representing 200 banks, how do they look at a property with deferred maintenance? Let's say substantial deferred maintenance.
Do you want to talk about a purchase or a refinance?
Purchase.
For a purchase, deferred maintenance, it can range. I'd say the big banks shy away from it. If there's,
Shy away meaning deny it, just don't even want to touch it.
Yeah, or like they'll drop leverage in order to accommodate for the capital improvements
Drop
being made.
leverage, lower loan amount.
Lower the loan amount, yeah. So credit unions are great for this. Typically what we'll do is we'll just have like an escrowed account where if, there's $40,000 that need to be spent to improve the property, maybe that just gets taken out of the loan amount or held in an account with the bank in order to do those improvements. But what I'm also able to really offer clients are bridge loan sources and private money for those types of things.
Speaking of bridge loan, my next question, and then for the viewing public, How I Met Maddy, sounds like a TV show. How I Met Maddy. In the 90s, I was the listing agent for a lot of properties. And so I'm the listing agent. We're going into escrow, and I'm waiting for the buyer to perform, the buyer's agent to perform. And I'm sitting there waiting. And I get a call from the agent. This happened so many times. And the agent, who is typically a single-family agent, inexperienced agent, would say, well, we can't get the loan, we have to cancel the deal.
Right.
And I would call who was Maddie's boss, and he would jump in and save the deal. And that's how I met Maddy, because she was working for him. And it was an incredible, I was just so grateful, because as a listing agent, you don't get to pick the lender.
Yeah.
The other agent picks it.
Yeah.
But your old boss would go in and fix loans for me and get me paid. So my kids and we're grateful for that. My question on bridge loans, is that still a realistic option for a buyer? And why would a buyer get a bridge loan?
Yeah, really good question. And I get this a lot from people. To break it down, bridge lending, AKA private money lending, is a great tool to essentially bridge the gap between conventional financing and hard money. So in the event that you are trying to purchase a property that maybe has half the units vacant, for example, that's an opportunity where a bank would never lend on something like that because the cash flow's not there and occupancy isn't there, versus a private lender that we work with, many of them. They're able to say, hey, look, we see the future value of this property and we'll give you a 12, 18-month loan at, leverages that banks can't hit, or loan amounts that banks can't hit because of cash flow reasons, to essentially get you there to that next step to then refinance the loan with a traditional bank.
Dear viewer, you're wondering if there's a specific example. Maddy and I did a deal in Montebello a couple years ago, 5 units. The rents were substantially below market.
Yeah.
And Maddy and I proposed to my buyer a bridge loan. We did a bridge loan, closed it in 2 weeks or whatever. And then the buyer went in. So Maddy's lender did the deal, closed it. The buyer went in, and through buyouts and through
He did some improvements as well. Yeah.
Raised the rents about 40%, if I recall correctly. So during the year, about a year.
It was only about a year, yeah.
So during the year, he paid Maddy's bridge loan, raised the rents 40%, and then Maddy refinanced him out and got all of his money out. Or had that.
So not only did he get a great discount on the property because of the fact that the rents were so low and traditional banks weren't able to lend on it, but we were actually able to refinance him within the next year, get him a rate in the 5s, and then also give him all his money back for the down payment.
So he essentially bought no money down.
He essentially had a no money down loan by the time that we were done in 18 months.
I know when I explained it to him, he was kind of like, freaked out, but it made perfect sense, and he was very happy. So the other thing is, when you say to a seller, all cash as is, 2-week close,
right,
that really helps your bargaining power, which in this case happened. But anyway, that's the bridge loan. People are scared of bridge loans, it seems like. But right now, a regular loan today is about 6.25%, 6.5%. Just
like
ballpark.
low sixes.
But a bridge, you quoted like a little over 7 something.
Yeah, so I have a great program right now for California properties that's starting at about 7.99%.
So the difference between 6.2 and 7.9, if you can get into an all-cash situation, that's fantastic. I mean, from a brokerage point of view.
Yeah, and quick closes, no appraisal, get the loan done fast. Ultimately, we're really focused on what is the strategy for the deal. these bridge loans, they don't work for passive investors. This is more so for the investor that is coming in and wants to improve rents or, maybe fix up a few units, put in some work to the building so that they could get that value appreciation. And what we're really seeing explode in the private money space and really the construction space is ADU construction in Los Angeles in order to increase rents and really improve cash flow.
So if you buy a 5-unit building on a bridge loan, and let's say you can put 2 additional units on there, would you provide bridge loan financing for the purchase and then provide financing for the ADU construction?
So I could do both. Is
that 2 separate loans, or is that one?
It would be one loan. So
one loan expanded.
Yeah. So it'd be one loan.
To close.
To close on the loan. So typically closing, you're looking at about like 70 to 75% loan to value on the purchase. So you still want to come in with 25 to 30% down on the purchase. But then what we would do is then we would fund up to 100% of the renovation costs. So really your only out-of-pocket cost is typically your down payment. And then from there, you have the additional funds in order to
Are you guys
go
listening
build.
to this? This is good stuff. This is good. People don't know this.
Yeah.
Now, that's not
very
available
unknown.
to your 200 institutions. The institutional lenders typically won't do something like this. You need that flexibility with a bridge.
Yeah, and that's where really our like private sources come in. So we work with like a lot of family offices and local private individuals that will help see that vision and ultimately finance a project like that.
What are the points or the costs? So if a regular loan is X points, how many more points is it for the bridge then? Is that's where they kind of get you, right? And the points?
Yeah, so bridge loans tend to be a little bit more expensive, but you save on down payment essentially because you're able to really get more money out of the property. So on average, you're looking at about 2 points total. So 2% of the loan amount is typical on a bridge loan. And then traditional loans, you're probably looking at 0 to 1%. Depending on the deal.
I have 2 pet peeve questions. What's the biggest pet peeve that buyers, so this is just between us.
Yeah.
So your clients will never see this. If you have a client, if you line up your last 20 clients, what do they do that drives you nuts as far as that you're like, oh, I wish I didn't have to deal with this?
So
in general, not anyone specific.
I think a lot of people they don't understand that I am not the bank. So what I typically like to tell clients is I'm like, think of me like your attorney, right? Tell me everything that you don't want to tell the bank, and then we could figure out a solution because ultimately non-disclosure always gets brought up in underwriting.
So confess to the crime of theft to your attorney, and your attorney will try to make it.
And then we'll make it work. And if there's things that we need to mitigate up front, we can. But I've had so many.
So you'll
deals.
find out about bad things after the fact when you're in front of your 200 sources.
Yeah. So people will have me go to bat for them, and we'll do all this work, and then a lawsuit, for example, will pop up in underwriting, and then they'll be like, "Oh, well, I didn't know I needed to disclose that." But ultimately, banks are a lot smarter than people give them credit for, and they will find the information if it's public
confess
record.
your crime to your mortgage broker before you.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier for me to negotiate that up front than it is to do that in underwriting because now the bank feels that you are misleading them in certain ways, and now it's a character issue, and ultimately we want to show the client in the best light possible, and ultimately if you know that up front, bank already agrees to it, shouldn't be no issues moving forward.
So you get like an explanation letter then of something bad.
Yeah, so
to go with the bad news and then present that.
Yeah, so like ultimately for us, like lending is all about storytelling. It's way more narrative based than it really is financial. So it's like, who is our client? What's his character? Will he be a great asset to the bank? Can we have future relationships with this guy? And ultimately putting your client with the best foot forward is really our goal because ultimately my client isn't only the buyer, it's also the bank. So I'm able to really work both sides there. And if there's things that aren't being disclosed to me that will pop up in underwriting, it ultimately just ends up hurting the client in the end.
So tell your mortgage broker everything ahead of time, all the bad news.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, things that clients think are deal killers are really not. It's just like, okay, like everyone has a past. People make mistakes. But ultimately, getting ahead of those is always a lot better than kind of retroactively trying to save a deal because of something that wasn't able to be disclosed in the beginning.
So that's pet peeve buyers. What about pet peeves realtors? What do we do as realtors that drive you crazy that no realtor will see this? So.
Yeah, I would say I mean, realtors are pretty good. I mean, probably setting unrealistic expectations is a big one. So
the realtor sets unrealistic expectations to the buyer.
Right.
That they're not necessarily your words. They're us saying, this is
Yeah.
great, no problem, you'll get the loan,
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
So
And then
it's funny because realtors are all really positive, right?
We're
And
salespeople.
Optimistic, yeah. And then there's people on my side who we're always looking a little bit more towards the negative and trying to overcome potential pitfalls because ultimately banks are always like really negative. But
we think of them as deal killers. That's what we say. That's what we say among ourselves. That's our pet peeve.
Yeah,
to you guys.
so that's how we have to bridge the gap there. So ultimately, that just really comes through communication, though. I mean, just being able to be communicative with your realtor and like building that relationship with them and the rapport to be able to say like, hey, here are some things that maybe could come up in underwriting, but we're going to get over it. Here's the solution we're going to set. And then ultimately, we're all on the same team. So we're all working for the same client and we want to get the deal done.
Now, there's a trend, I think, nowadays where you go to a national, like, you used to go to your local store to buy something. Now you buy it on Amazon. What's the advantage of having a local mortgage broker, like someone like you that knows Southern California versus, something you see on TV or some national lender?
Yeah, no, I mean, really good question. And I actually get this a lot. Locally, I mean, I drive all my properties. So even really before we get in with the bank, I'm already driving the property, making sure that there's nothing that could potentially pop up from like a deferred maintenance standpoint, for example, like you brought up. And really just doing the underwriting and being realistic is more beneficial to the client than anything. I mean, we really do a ton of business in Southern California. We know where cap rates are today. We have a feeling of where expenses are typically shaking out for apartment buildings. If there's something that pops up on a cash flow statement that doesn't look right, that's really the advantage that you get with working with us because we're going to be calling that out, being like, hey, how come your insurance is so high? Like, I just funded a property right down the street that was half of this insurance, That's where we are really able to bring in like insurance brokers that we work with or other, we have local presence with contractors and other people that can help with the property. So really for me, like as a mortgage broker, I'm not just doing the loan. I'm also helping with insurance, title, escrow, working with the realtors. So you really get that whole piece, not just the loan side.
Working with the realtors is the highlight of your job, correct, Maddy?
Yeah.
That's the correct answer.
Oh,
here.
yeah, for sure.
I asked you your biggest pet peeve. What's the biggest mistake that apartment owners make when applying for financing? What do you see that you just want to strangle people and say, don't do this?
Luckily, typically what I would say when you're not working with a mortgage broker, I think borrowers really get in their own way by over disclosure of certain things sometimes. Like there's a way to disclose certain information without it technically being a deal killer. And that's really where our relationships come into play.
Like what? You just got mad for under disclosing. Now you're getting mad for over disclosing. What kind of stuff would you over disclose? Like I lost my job yesterday or what's
or just, like, for example, like a big one was I was working with a client and luckily he was working with me. So we were able to get over it. But like he had all these tenant issues the last year, people not paying rent, other things like that. But he fixed the problem. So it was all fine in the end. He doesn't necessarily need to say all that to a bank to put all that cloud over them. But
he said it to you, not to the bank.
But he said it to me so that we were able to get a property manager in there.
Right,
property manager fixed up the units, moved the tenants out, and now he had a fully stabilized, fully cash flowing building. So situations like that, the narrative is so important. And if you end up on the wrong foot sometimes, that's really where you just can't dig out of it. And that's where you kind of bring in someone like me to be able to kind of put all that information together, properly disclose things that need to be disclosed, but also in a way that helps highlight both the positives and the potential hurdles of a deal.
I've got a good analogy for you. Going to a lender without a mortgage broker is like going to a judge without an attorney.
Exactly. Like
you never do that. You never go, Your Honor, I didn't steal the bag, But
exactly.
But you did steal it. the lender can a lawyer can put the best face on
Yeah.
what you did to minimize the damages. Obviously, the entire state of California is under rent control. I have clients that say, well, so-and-so city isn't. I go, the whole state is
Yeah.
under rent control.
Yeah.
Now, there may be more, but how do lenders see rent control? Because in other words, if you've got a 2-bedroom in Whittier and you're getting $1,500 a month and the rent is $2,500, that's $1,000 difference.
Right.
You can't raise the rents overnight.
Yeah.
How do lenders see a below market rent because of rent control and the inability of the buyer to buy the property and then raise it to market rents? How do lenders see the issue of rent control?
Yeah. So ultimately, when we look at things like rent control, for example, especially when we're looking at a purchase, there's a little bit more leeway that we have because buyers could implement strategies such as building ADUs or flipping tenants, buying out tenants out of their lease. I've seen so many people moving to the buyout model because ultimately paying someone out of their lease 25, 30 grand. If you lease that for an extra $2,000 a month, you've already almost made it back in the first year.
So just to explain that, I'm renting. I bought a property. It's $1,500. The market rent is $2,500. $1,000 difference there.
Yeah.
You're saying that you're seeing a lot of clients that will then buy that property, and rather than raising 8% every year and never being able to catch out,
Right.
you go to the tenant and say, "Here's 20 grand cash, move out. Here's 30 grand, move out."
Yeah.
And it pencils out.
And ultimately, if you're a long-term holder, I mean, you'll make that money back in 1 to 2 years. So
Which is what they did on the 5 units in Montebello.
And that's what they did too, is they bought those tenants out, just, put extra paint on the walls, maybe changed the flooring a little bit, and then they rented it for an extra 40% a month.
And that's completely legal, completely ethical,
Completely legal.
moral. Everyone's happy. You didn't
Yep.
you didn't do anything
The tenants
wrong.
agree to it, and a lot of them, have been in these properties for over 10 years, and some of them just are either leaving the state or don't want to live there anymore. So it's kind of the opportunity for a potential buyer to come in and do a strategy like that. Granted, it doesn't work all the time, but another way for a buyer to also really help increase rents is kind of by doing that ADU model. Otherwise, you do end up potentially getting locked into that rent control, depending on what city you're in.
I see you're kind enough to bring your crystal ball in your purse. I appreciate that. What do you see? And I know everyone does this to you, to predict the future. But
Yeah.
But if you look 6 months or a year down the road, is there anything that you see hopeful or hopeless? Is there anything that you see that the viewer should say, "Hey, this is what's going to happen," or this is seasonal? We're in May.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you see? Obviously, as salespeople, our answer is sell now, buy now,
Yeah,
get your
refinance
loan
now.
now.
Yeah.
But what do you see down the road?
Yeah, so this year especially has been really hard to predict. I mean, we had the whole motto last year of stay alive till 25 was the whole motto. We thought that rates were going to go down, and they did for a little bit in 2025. We were in like the mid 5% range. Now today we're in the low 6s. And that's mostly due to certain geopolitical events and just that uncertainty in today's market. It's always better to get in with your mortgage broker, for example, with me early, because I'm able to really set up those metrics to say, hey, your strike price is 5.75 interest rate. You told me
Strike price means what? What's strike price?
or your strike rate. Like I always ask clients, what rate today would get you to refinance?
Okay.
And
So
sometimes
strike is make a decision to proceed.
yeah, so
to
it's
proceed.
like if rates are 6% today, and rates go down to 5.75, will that get you to move?
Okay.
In which case, some of them say yes, some of them still think we're going to get down to the 3s. In which case, I just say good luck. But
So as I film this right now, we're in a conflict with Iran.
yes,
If that resolves itself,
yeah.
then you would see rates go down then? The current increase is because of the instability in the markets because of the war, right?
Yeah, that's been the biggest trend in rates moving upwards. But ultimately, banks still have to lend money regardless of interest rates where they are today. So banks have internal quotas that they have to meet quarterly. And if they're not meeting those quarterly, sometimes they can be impacted.
Okay, speaking of that,
Yeah.
I know insurance companies, they will say to an insurance broker, hey, we're entering in the Southern California market, and we're from New Jersey, and we really want market share, so we want a product that's below market. So you know which of your 200 are moving in and out.
Yeah.
So will you have a sale on money? Will lenders come to you and say, hey, we really want to get business, like you said earlier? And will you know that information then?
Yeah, so because we have such strong relationships with our capital providers, they'll typically come to us first and give us first look. So I, for example, have a bank right now that's very competitive down in Southern California that only really is working with a select group of brokers.
What's competitive? What does that mean?
So that interest rate, for example, is like 4.95% today. So
when everything else is 6.
When everything else is 6.
So money's on sale.
And that's only because we have a strong relationship with that group. They don't market to the general public that rate. They say
that's a gigantic discount.
Yeah, it is a hard loan.
I'm glad I asked the question. I'm going to ask Maddy for a loan.
It's a hard loan. Underwriting is tough, but it's there, and those types of programs are really what you don't get off the street.
And that lender wants market share.
Yep, they want good
get
loans.
Business, and they reach out to you for that.
Yeah, they want good loans from good brokers that they've worked with before in the past. That'll just help a seamless process. Because ultimately, that's really what we're there for, is to essentially package up a transaction and make it easy as possible. Like my first initial to a lender, they shouldn't have any questions coming back, really.
Okay, so it's so complete, so thorough.
Yeah, and that helps us, close 15, 20 days faster than if you were to go by yourself, and just make sure that surety of execution in this market is just so paramount that you really just don't want to be making any mistakes there up front.
Not that this show is about me, but one time I got a call from my travel agent that said, there's a sale going on right now. I think it was Japan Airlines, $300 round trip.
Wow.
To Japan. It's like the late 90s.
Oh, my
gosh.
gosh.
So I called my buddy. We went to Japan for the weekend.
Oh, wow.
And one of the people staying with us said, Jim, at that price, you can't afford not to go.
Yeah.
No, but I've never thought about that before. I just kind of asked that question out of the blue. But someone like you knows from time to time when money is, quote unquote, on sale.
Mm-hmm. Or like we have, I'm working with a lender, this happened literally this morning, who a lender told me, they're like, hey, by the way, we're dropping rates tomorrow. If you have any deals coming in, let's get it in now, and then let's get it in before rates rise again. So we'll kind of get some of that information from our bank reps that we work really closely with, because then we're able to facilitate a lot more transactions together and ultimately be forward facing with the client and say, hey, look, like we got this deal coming up, like your strike price is 5.75. We're at 5.75. Let's get moving before we see any more adjustments.
So if I don't need money right away, I need to refinance for a bit.
Yeah.
Could I give you my name and email address, and then you contact me when there's money on sale?
Yeah.
And then you could say, hey Jim, it was 8 months ago you asked me, this lender is offering XYZ.
Yeah.
And I could take advantage of that, even though I don't necessarily need it. Mm-hmm. With below market financing, I might just go out and buy something.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, interest rate really isn't it's not necessarily the number one driver for a lot of people. In residential, typical primary homes, everyone's interested, I want the lowest rate, because that's really all you want. Commercial, there's a lot of different factors that we have to take into account. Do you want to take money from your property to go purchase something else? Are you thinking about selling your property because you want to go invest out of state? Interest rate is a component of that, but it's not the whole story. It's like a chapter in a book. Interest rate matters, but ultimately really seeing someone's whole portfolio and understanding, do you want this as a long-term property? Are you going to sell it next year? All of those factors are really important in really getting the best loan. And sometimes it's not even really about rate. It's just more so about need.
Talk to me about cross-collateralization. Let's say I own 4 buildings. Let's say I own 3 apartment buildings and my primary residence.
Okay.
And I've got equity in all of them.
Okay.
And I want to buy a 4th property or 5th or whatever it is. What can I do to avoid dipping into my checking account for the down payment? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to keep everything cross-collateralized forever. What would my strategy be where you could say to me, okay, Jim, you can buy that 4th property from the equity, but you're not tied forever. You have some kind of a plan for that?
So To answer your first question about collateralization, most of the time banks will have release provisions in there.
After a certain time period, then.
Yeah, or like sometimes it's not even about a time period. It's just they allocate value for the property that you, for example, already own or have equity in. Then you have your valuation for the property that you're buying. Combined, that's your total valuation. And then the loan amount will be based off of that potential value. So if you were to say, hey, I don't want to cross, property A that I already owned, then, you just would most likely have to pay down the loan a certain percentage in order to take that out of the cross. But what I typically like to do, and what I find has been the most effective, is ultimately really doing two separate loans, because both properties are going to have different metrics to them. And maybe property A that you own is going to get a lower interest rate than the property that you're buying. So it doesn't make sense necessarily to
How would you
cross them.
recommend I pull money out of, without selling my properties? How would you recommend I buy the fourth property without selling?
Without
Get a second, you mean, on these?
Well, so we have second trustee options, or we could just do a whole new refinance depending on
Of
where
everything.
depending on where interest rates are. But that's really what is helpful. Like in my initial conversation with a client, I'm really able to gather a lot of that information up front. And
Okay.
by getting a schedule of real estate from a client, I'm really able to see the full picture. And if someone has, a thought in mind, like, hey, I have this duplex that I'm working on, I have X amount of equity in that. Like, I want to refinance this building. But let's say I get the schedule of real estate and I'm like, hey, you actually have a lot of equity in this multifamily property. Maybe multifamily rates today are better than single family. Let's refinance this one instead. You're going to get, 20 basis points less on rate, going to get the same amount of loan amount. And then you can keep this one, a little more free and clear. So that's kind of where I'm able to really come in. And sometimes clients don't, they have a certain vision in mind. And then once we're able to really take into account the full picture, we can really help advise in the best way possible. And maybe there's a different avenue we can take.
What's the rule of thumb on refinancing? So I bought a 10-unit building in Buena Park 5 years ago.
Okay.
And it's adjustable typically for 3-4 years, right? Typically?
Yeah. So like right now in today's market, we're looking at about like 3 to 5 year fixed periods.
So then I've now gone past my fixed and I'm now floating. It's adjustable. Mm-hmm. What's the rule of thumb? At what point in time do you want me to refinance that? Is there any rule of thumb or how do I know I should be happy with the loan I have right now? And how do I know when to call you and say, Maddy, get me out of this, get me a different loan?
Well, you call me regardless.
Call her regardless. That's the correct answer.
And I'm very straight up with my clients too. Like sometimes, like for example, I have a client right now who I'm working with. He's a developer and his loan just went adjustable. So he's around 7% interest rate today. But if he were to refinance the loan for the interest rates that we have in, say, the low sixes, he's going to have to come in to buy down that loan by an extra $500,000, which he doesn't want to do.
Wow.
So sometimes it does make sense to roll to an adjustable because then you don't have to come in with cash to close. But then you have to also recognize, you're floating that rate and kind of how long do you think you can sustain that until you actually need to execute on a strategy? And that's really where we can also come in and help out in understanding, like, does it make sense for you to roll to adjustable or does it make sense for us to, get you a new loan, which we can also re-amortize on a 30-year amortization. So essentially your monthly payments could shake out to a little bit more favorable.
So this is a question I want to ask on your behalf to Maddy. Maddy, I've got 4 properties. I've got 3 apartment buildings on my house, 4 different lenders.
Yeah.
Can I grab my loan statements and just PDF them to you, and then you analyze them all and tell me what I'm doing wrong, what you recommend I do, and why?
Yeah.
Not going to charge me for that?
No, we don't charge anything until we close the loan.
But you would be happy to hear from me, right?
Yeah, of course.
And then the question is, you would have to honestly tell me, after I pay the points for the refi and the appraisal and all that hassle, it does make sense to refinance everything through Maddy, or you would be honest enough to say, no, leave everything alone.
Right, exactly.
Now, mostly after 5 years, is the answer refi or leave it alone? In your experience?
Again, it kind of depends. Like in LA County, it's getting tougher because there's been so much rent control and rent freezes in the last year, so people haven't been able to push rents as much as they want. And then on top of that, you have higher utility costs, higher insurance that's bringing that loan amount down. It really is more client specific whether it makes sense to do a refinance or not. I always think it's good to explore your options early than to be on your heels waiting too long and then you missed out on your window.
Are there, single family has these, but are there any first-time apartment buyer programs out there? Is there any advantage to being a first-time buyer, or is the lending world doesn't see first-time buyers like single family does? No,
yeah, single family and commercial are two totally different animals. I'd say if anything, it can be more restrictive depending on which bank you go for if you're a first-time buyer. I think if you don't own any real estate at all and you want to go buy a 30 unit, that's going to be some questions there as to how you're going to manage it. But typically we're able to get over some of those requirements by hiring a property manager for at least the first year.
Do lenders want to see, or do they demand professional management, or not necessarily?
For first-time buyers, yes, I would say.
Required, requested, advised? What's the?
I would say 90% of the time it's required that a first time.
So you sign a property management agreement, and that's part of the file. Because you don't know what you're doing.
Which we're already underwriting that expense anyway. So regardless if you have a property manager or not, banks are underwriting assuming that you are going to have one.
Do you have to see a contract?
Yeah, we'll have to have a contract in place, and typically we're accounting for about a 5% management fee based off of effective gross income. And I've been successful in the past of getting that down with an agreement. Like, for example, I have a guy who is really tight with his property manager, and his is only a 3% management fee. So we brought that down.
So you can see Maddy's contact information right here. You don't mind if they email you their bank statement, say, give me a diagnosis, like a medical diagnosis of what's going on. Now, after you close escrow, how much reserve money do lenders typically require that I set aside as a buyer? So I've already put 40% down, which is what lenders require, 60% loan to value. I've already put 40% down.
Yeah.
I got, my bank account's depleted. How much money do I have to set aside typically for a lender in reserves?
So I would say rule of thumb typically is the greater of 10% of the loan amount or 6 months of interest payments.
So you want to see that in my bank statement then. So you'll ask me for that, and then you'll send that to the eventual one of the 200 sources.
Yeah.
So here's Jim's money covering the negative cash flow.
Yeah. And not all assets are created equal. Cash is king always. So if it's liquid, that's automatically counted. Marketable securities such as like stocks, bonds, things like that, depending on how liquid they can be, will be counted for their market value, typically at about 90% to 100%. And then retirement is where some people can really get hit. If you're a borrower who's not over the age of 65, who can draw on those retirement funds, most of the time lenders are looking at those closer to about 50% of its value. So you can have a great retirement portfolio, but if you can't draw on it, banks are going to say, hey, if anything happens, you're going to have to pay a huge tax event, and it's not necessarily liquid. So liquid cash and securities tend to be on the highest totem pole, and then retirement is lower if you're not over the age of 65.
I was born and raised in Japan. You also are an immigrant. What state are you from? Where were you born?
Oh, I'm from here.
Where were you born?
I was born in Newport.
Oh, I thought you were from Indiana or
no,
your family's there.
No, I went to school.
You are a native Southern Californian.
Yeah.
Man. I apologize.
All good.
What apartment features are lenders liking to see? What are there any specific features of an apartment building where lenders say we like that about the property?
Honestly, the biggest thing is just the tenants. I mean, making sure that there's no mispayments, no big tenant disputes, because ultimately lenders just want surety of cash flow coming in.
Do you like to see leases or month to month? Do you care? Do lenders care?
It doesn't matter as much. I mean,
the income is the issue.
The income's more of...
There's not less stability because it's month to month versus a lease?
No, actually, if anything, month to month leases can be seen more favorable, especially from an owner's perspective, because you don't have that lock-in period. Month to month is fine on apartments. I mean, it's very, very common. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily the biggest barrier of entry. I think a bigger barrier of entry from a lender perspective is tenant collections and making sure that you can actually collect the rent that's notated on the lease or the month-to-month agreement.
Now, people talk about California, Sacramento with their new rules and regulations constantly. Do any of these affect your work as far as getting loans? Are there any new laws or requirements or lending underwriting standards that come from Sacramento that hamper you or make it difficult for you?
I'd say probably the retrofit requirements are typically always up there. Other than that, I mean, we just had in the last year or so some balcony requirements for certain apartments that needed to be fixed up, but it's more minor items than anything. I mean, the biggest hurdles in California are mostly rent control and making sure those retrofit requirements are in place.
What breed of dog do you have?
I have a pit bull mix.
What's the name?
Her name's Nala.
Nala. And she follows you around the house constantly.
Yeah.
So does mine. What apartment properties are currently hard to finance? You mentioned tuck under parking.
Yeah.
Are there any apartments where you get a call and you go, oh no, none of these 200 lenders, well they frown upon it. Is there any?
Yeah.
Like near Fireside and near Hillside or?
Yeah, because then that also goes into like the insurance question. You know, properties.
But I'm talking about from a lending point of view. Is there anything?
I mean, the biggest thing would be deferred maintenance that I can think of. You know, like if you drive by a property and like the siding's falling off, the roof clearly needs to be repaired.
They don't see potential like an investor does. They just see a nightmare that they don't want to get involved in.
Yeah, because you have to think of it from like a lender perspective. If I was a lender and I had to take this property back, how much of a hassle would it be to operate the property or sell it? So from a lender perspective, if they see a property with a ton of deferred maintenance on it, you know, maybe it's not being upkept, tenant problems left and right, they're going to say, you know, maybe this isn't the deal for us because if we had to take it back, this would be more of a headache. And banks are not in the business to be owning apartments.
Well, in 1 to 4, you have that used to have the 203K FHA loan where they want you to buy a property and they want to give you money to finance it. Is there no such thing in the 5+ world where a lender says, oh yeah, is there any of your 200 sources that go, not the private ones, but where they go, yeah, we would love to get involved in a property that's in disrepair and we'll give you money to help you. That doesn't exist?
So I do have one lending program that's actually been really competitive. It is with a bank, and it's right in between traditional financing and hard money. So you're getting a better interest rate. I mean, rates right now are like in the mid-6s for that program, and we call it a market rent program. So it's only for purchases, and it's.
But they would look kindly on a property with deferred maintenance and below market rents.
Yeah. So what
they jump in.
So what we would do is then we would present the buyer, which would typically be a more experienced investor who maybe has done a project like this before, and we'd essentially pitch to them, hey, buyer's buying this property for X, rents are 40% below market. My buyer is going to put a new roof on the building. He's going to turn units, and then we're able to ultimately underwrite the cash flow 24 months out. So 2 years out, we're saying, hey, in 2 years, we think our rents are going to be X. So we're underwriting off of that future value, and you're still getting a great rate in like the mid-6s, but you're also not taking like, say, a hard money loan that's going to be, 8% or whatever it may be. So that's kind of a bridging the gap.
It's only one of your 200 sources. So it's very rare to have that.
Yeah, that's like a very rare program, but it's been very beneficial. I mean, I have 2 clients right now that are looking at that and about to do that program just because it really bridges that gap and helps to get them in a property that really has the potential, but it's just not there yet.
How are interest-only products? Are they available? In other words, it's kind of like a bridge loan. I want to get in. I want to get in. I have a lot of things to do. And how long is interest only, and what kind of terms? I mean, it's something we typically didn't recommend in the past because it gets people in trouble, right?
Yeah, so luckily in Southern California, we typically never really have appreciation issues. I mean, everyone wants to live here, so values typically are trending upwards faster than the national average. Someone who would take an interest-only loan typically is going to want to either say, hey, I want to hold more of my monthly payments each month because I want to, maybe improve upon the property, or I'm thinking about buying something else, so I want to hold my cash as much as possible. Or I have clients that are saying, hey, I'm going to just flip this property in a year. I don't want to pay down the principal because ultimately I'd rather save that money, put it back into the property, and then I'm going to sell it next year anyway for a gain of 100K or whatever it may be. So that's not as big of an issue for them.
You don't recommend it that much, do you? It's rare that you would have?
It's in the commercial world, it's not as rare. I'd say probably about
Like 1 out of 20 deals, or
I'd say probably like 50 to 60% of my clients will take an interest-only option.
Oh, really?
Especially right now with where interest rates are. So
Okay.
a lot of clients...
Okay, so they're doing interest only because they expect it to go down, rates to go down?
Yeah, so they're like, why would I pay principal and interest on a higher interest rate? I expect, the...
Is interest only less of a rate than
No, so interest only, you're typically about the same rate. I mean, maybe give
It's just
or
a
take.
smaller payment.
It's a smaller payment because you're only paying down the interest.
You're not making any progress on the principal.
Yeah.
What advice would you give apartment owners who are considering selling versus refinancing?
Selling versus refinancing. It's just, what are your goals? I mean, what are you expecting to get out of the sale? Are you going to 1031 into something else? Are you going to exchange into another property? Are you just looking to get out of real estate in general? Ultimately, it's like, okay, if you sell your property, what are you going to buy? Are you going to take the tax event and just be done with it? Or are you expecting to level up your cash flow in a certain event? In which case, then I would refer them to someone like you, for example, more of a realtor or an agent.
That's the correct answer.
That could help them with that.
Now, I'm a East Los Angeles, and you're an Orange County snob. Are there any areas that you, as a lender, like, or you see appreciation? Or, for example, like on a national level, everyone's moving their money from LA to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Because we're a communist state and they're capitalistic. Is there anything in Southern California that you see trend-wise that's interesting, the way you go, hey, there's a lot of activity going here, or this is a dead area? I mean, you may not want to mention specific cities to get in trouble, but is there anything you see that we don't see, area-wise?
I would say the biggest thing is rent control, always.
But the whole state's rent control.
But specific cities have, for example,
they add to it.
Santa Ana is at a 3% rent control or something really low like that.
Okay, so they've taken the state, which is 5% plus cost of living, roughly 8%, and they've taken the 8 down to a 3%.
Right. So in those areas specifically, unless you have a buyer that's coming in with like 50% down, you're typically not getting super high leverages because you can't raise the rents.
How common is a dramatic reduction like that? I mean, 8% to 3%. 3%, you're way below inflation. So you're losing ground every month.
Yeah. So it's
how common is that? So you said Santa Ana. How common are those cities that do that then in what you see?
More common in LA County than Orange County and San Diego. But a lot of the times what I find is the buyers that will go into those areas, they are, number one, getting the property for a discount because the realtors that are selling the property understand that, there's just a lot smaller of a buyer pool and they're not going to get as good as a loan from a leverage perspective. So what they're going to do is they're probably going to build on that lot, maybe like add an ADU or increase income in that regard.
Okay.
They're not going to be the people that are typically going to just be passive. And
so they see their growth coming from that versus the rents.
Yeah, and it's especially in California, as you know, very hard to evict tenants. It takes a very long time. It's very expensive. So most of the time what you're going to find is you're going to have a stable tenant base that's been paying rent for a long time. And then on the side, you're going to maybe build upon that lot and increase income an alternative way. But I'd say that's probably the hardest hurdle per se, is just specific rent control in certain cities that are more restrictive than, say, the state level. But we still have options for it. I mean, we can get around it, but that's probably, from a California standpoint, one of the barriers to entry for certain cities.
What do you want to say to my clients? So how do they get a hold of you? Do you work the weekends? I mean, how do you want them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so contact information. I have my cell phone always. I work all the time, call, text, message, whatever it may be. I mean, I'm here as a sounding board for most people. So just always feel free to reach out. Happy to have a conversation. Even if it's not something that we can move on now, there's always going to be an opportunity down the future. And it's always better to have all your ducks in a row and be ready to strike when the iron's hot.
So if you call me and say you want to buy an apartment building, as you can see, I'm not going to engage with you right away. I want you to be qualified through Maddy because I want her to tell me that you're ready to go. And as a service to you, I want you to know, 200 sources is incredible. So to be able to have that information. So I'm just a warning. If you want to buy a property through Joseph Apartments, you're going to have to go through Maddy first. And then once Maddy blesses you, gives you the seal of approval, then we can buy properties. But Maddy, thank you for coming in. How do we reach out to you? What's your contact information?
Yeah, so my email address is Maddy, MADDY, at cornerstone-L as in Larry, G as in Greg.com. And then my cell phone number is 714-345-8996.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next month.